This is the Marquette Energy Analytics Spring webinar with AccuWeather. I'll be starting out talking, but as we go along, you'll meet some other folks as well. So I'll introduce us at Marquette Energy Analytics first. Here are some names that you might hear if you talk to us or if you've spoken with us before. Tom Quinn is our president and CEO. Dr. Ronald Brown is our chief science officer. Sarah Grotman is the director of operations. Greg Merkel is our director of analytics. Jimmy Dranowski, who's going to be talking after me, is the DevOps engineer. And then I am the marketing leader. So that's a little bit about who we are. And then after we talk, Steve Root from AccuWeather Business, or For Business, is going to be sharing some insights into last winter's weather and giving us just an overview of what's been going on the weather side. So thanks for joining us, Steve. It always brings a lot of good perspective to these conversations. So just to give a little more background on Marquette Energy Analytics, this is our motto, our mission statement, if you will. Our passion is to transform energy-related data. So taking, gas or electric data from utilities and turning that into decision support tools that are easy, reliable, and innovative. So that's our goal, to take data, turn it into tools that help you make decisions for your utilities. Some quick background facts. We've been serving utilities in the U.S. for 31 years. It'll be 32 in June. 6 years as an independent company. So we started out at Marquette Energy Analytics, or Marquette University, as a lab in the engineering school. In 2018, we broke off and became our own company. So that's been 6 years so far. And then we forecast 25% of the U.S. natural gas demand. And as we've been getting more customers and adding more people on, that number is trending upwards. So if you see us give a presentation, you might see that move up to 28. So we're very excited about that. A lot of good movement happening. So just to summarize what exactly it is we do, we're a national leader in energy demand modeling. We do both natural gas and electricity for utilities. We're a national leader in forecasting. We do data analytics. That's our bread and butter. And we also provide proven models that work all across the country. So if you work with us, you can expect unmatched analysis and then also world-class customer support and education. Here's a quick summary of our services. You'll see MCAS Power, MCAS Gas Day, Gas Hour. MCAS is our SaaS product. So MCAS Power forecasts electric. Gas Hour is hourly gas demand. Gas Day is daily gas demand. We also provide a medium, sort of long-term natural gas and electric demand forecaster, MCAS Planner. That's one of our newest offerings. Besides that, we provide studies and custom projects. Design Day or Design Hour analysis is one of our most common projects and studies that we do for people. And we also do econometrics-based demand forecasting. So looking at some other factors into, what's going to be changing in your demand. Hopefully that was informative for everybody about what we do. If you didn't know already, here's a quick map of who we serve. And so hopefully you see your own utility there. And if not, hopefully we'll get you on this list soon. Very exciting stuff. We'll cover some of our business partners, talk a little bit about marketing, things that are coming up in the near future, and then we'll get on to the next part. So everybody just hold on. We're very proud to partner with AccuWeather for Business. That's where Steve Root is from, who'll be talking after Jimmy. We're also part of the SGA, the AGA, the APGA. We're involved with the LDC gas forums, but we, of course, like to thank our many friends and customers who make things like this possible and are always a good partner in doing business. So as we wrap up the intro, I'll just talk about some events that are going on. Obviously, today we're at this May 22nd webinar with AccuWeather, which I'm thankful for everybody for signing up. We also have the Gas Forecasters Forum coming up. This is our second iteration. Last year it was in Charlotte, but this year it's going to be in Milwaukee, September 15th to 17th. I'll make sure to send out everybody an email with some more information on that at the conclusion of this webinar. You might see us at some conferences. We've already been to a bunch this year: SGA, APGA, LEC Forums, AGA, MEA Energy Association. So we do different speaking engagements here. On the bottom right, you can see Tom Quinn, our CEO, delivering a talk at the LDC Gas Forum Southeast. Another thing we like to mention is that we do sites visits and education. So heading out to your utility, giving some training and education on the sort of data we provide and help integrate that into your systems. And I would be remiss if I did not include some more about the Gas Forecasters Forum. This is an event I'm very proud of helping put together. Here's some pictures from last year's event. This was the big dinner we had on the first night. Here's some more photos as well from some of the networking events we did, pictures from inside the room when we were meeting. You'll see that it's a lot of people from all over the country, from the West Coast to the East Coast, North, South utilities, Midwest, Mountain, pretty much a selection from all across the U.S. of all people who either generate forecasts or use forecasts in their daily work. So it's a lot of like-minded individuals. A lot of you, if you're at this meeting, you probably have some peers that would have attended this. And if you would like to come to this year's event, we'd love to have you. So as you can see, we try to have fun. We try to mix up the formats of what's going on, so it's not just sitting and listening all the time, but we do try to deliver a lot of high-level insights and give the best experience that we can give. So that's that. Now I will be ending my portion. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast. If anybody has any questions about that, be sure to let me know. I will stop sharing here and I'll pass it off to Jimmy Dranovsky, who will be giving our next little portion of the webinar.
So, as Alex said, my name is Jimmy Dranowski. I work in development operations here at MEA. And in advance of Steve's winter weather review, I'm going to be walking us through a handful of weather-related scenarios using primarily our MCAS Gas Day product to point out just a variety of features related to accessing and understanding weather data around MCAS. So to start, let's look at where the weather data is visible to you in MCAS. Now, in what you're seeing, I just logged into my demo instance of MCAS Gas Day, and I can see the summary table reflecting the most recent forecast. In the upper half of each cell, I'm going to see the weather data associated with that day's forecast. So you can see here degrees and miles per hour average for the day. And in the bottom half of each cell, I can see the natural gas demand that MCAS is forecasting. I'll also note that all of this data I'm seeing in MCAS for both weather and load is going to be aligned to the gas day, wherever you are in the country. So now that I know where to find the data, I want to adjust my display so the weather data I'm looking at reflects more what I find most useful. So I'm going to go up to the top right corner of this table to the settings gear. And I have a few different weather display options. I could change to see temp highs and lows rather than average wind for every day. For me, wind is more important, so I'm going to keep it there. On temperature units, actually, HDDs is what I really care the most about. And so I don't need to see any of this data in terms of degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to set everything to be HDD. And I would like a little more granularity to the data I'm seeing. So I'm going to add a single decimal point to all the weather data. So these settings are now going to be saved for the next time I log in and open MCAS. But know that these settings are user specific. So if anyone else from my organization logs in, they're not going to see the same display changes that I made. Now that my view is set up as I want, the first use case I want to walk through is that of the gas controller who logs into the web portal in the morning and needs to act on the latest weather forecast. So the first action I might do is download the weather used in the most recent load forecast. Now, the easiest option is going to be to download the forecast CSV. up here in the top left with this button labeled CSV. So that's going to provide me any weather data that I've pre-configured to be in my forecast output file, and it's going to organize all that weather by operating area. So you can see all the data in here corresponds to the total area, the metropolis area, the Smallville area, as I have in here. There are limits to this file's contents, though. For one, this file is only going to give me any weather data points that have been pre-configured in my standard file for MCAST. So you can see this file contains HTD and HTDW data, but it doesn't have any other weather data inside of it. I know I want more data points like temp and dew point and wind speed. This data is also going to be limited to only provide me daily average values rather than a more granular hour by hour look at the weather forecast. And last, like I mentioned, it is going to be a limiting factor that I can only get data from this file on a per op area basis. And in my case, I want to see it from the individual weather stations across my territory. So because I need more data than this, I'll go up here in the top right and click downloads. I'm going to open up analysis, and I'm going to see three files here at the top: current forecast, current daily weather forecast, and current hourly weather forecast. The current forecast right here at the top, that's going to be the same file I just downloaded with the CSV button. So I know I don't want that. Then both of these next two downloads are going to allow me to get more granular details about the weather. And they're both going to be organized by weather stations that have operating area. So I could go to the current daily weather data, but like I said, I am looking for a more granular hour by hour data. So let's click on that third one down. And I'm going to open up advanced settings so I can see more of the options that I have for that file. Once I see the options, I'm going to make sure it includes wind and dew point, HDD, HDDW. I actually want to also just see the timestamp at which it came in. And I'm going to go ahead and click download CSV. So this is going to give me all of the data that I requested on a more on a weather station basis. I can see it's broken down for hour by hour, and I've got all of that weather data that I was requesting at the top. Now, just like with the display settings, these file settings are going to be saved for the next time I log in and need to download this information. So if this is something I need to regularly download, it's hopefully an ease of mind, but it is just going to be for me. If I normally download this information and I have to ask Alex to go download it next week, he won't have these same settings saved. Anyway, now I've got a CSV of the weather data for the forecast, but I want to look closer and understand this data better. So I'm going to click on a day of interest. Let's pick tomorrow on Metropolis. And I can see a bunch of stats when I look under the hood. I see my high and low temp for the day, my wind speed, my dew point, a lot of the weather stats right here along the top. Now, as I look down the page at the graphs, you'll notice the temperature values are always going to be denoted by gold, and the load values are always denoted by blue. That's going to be a design feature common through all of these graphs on MCAST. So the first chart on the left, the forecast history chart, this is going to quickly show me how dramatically the weather forecast has changed for this day over time. So we're looking at Friday, May 23rd for Metropolis, and we have an x-axis showing when the forecast was run, and we have a y-axis displaying the HDD and load values for the given forecast. So we can see back here the first time that we were running a forecast on May 23rd as a data point, we were thinking it was going to be a 7.6 HDDs, but as we've gotten a lot closer, we're now forecasting it to be 13.6 HDDs tomorrow. And so correspondingly, our load forecasts have changed quite a bit. You have a number of other ways to view the weather data on these charts. So if you look to the right, you'll see a time series of this forecast on a day-by-day basis. So it goes back about 7 days and forward about 7 days to show you the full picture of the data around this forecast date. On the next row down, I can see some quick stats about like how different is this weather value from the day prior, and how different is this from what I would normally expect for this day of the year. And along the middle here, I'll see a more granular hour by hour breakdown of the weather data. And if you license an hourly forecasting product, you'll see the hourly forecast as well. Now, one more tool that I like to use is the similar days lookup, and I'll keep scrolling down to get to that. So similar days is going to take in all the weather conditions of the selected day and auto-populate some similar days from the past few years of my own data set. It'll allow me to see the trajectory of the weather patterns for those similar days as well by showing me, okay, 2 days prior, 1 day prior, and then the actual similar day. And so this can be super helpful for me as a gas controller. But let's say I'm also feeling like these results are a little too broad. For example, maybe I only want to see data points that are similar days within like a degree or a degree and a half of the current forecasted temperature. I have another settings option up here on the right that'll allow me to enter in, limit temperature within 1.5 degrees or something similar. If I click save, that's going to rerun the similar days lookup and repopulate that whole table for me. So moving forward from there, the next use case I'd like to cover is a little more forward-looking. In this case, I don't just want to access the weather data once in a while, but I actually want some automation running to receive the weather data alongside every single forecast MCAS generates. So to do that, I'm going to open up the settings menu up here in the right. Now I have two options for setting up these recurring data points. The first option is going to be the MCAS API. So I could pop open the reference documentation using the links here, see the details on weather data organized in daily or hourly formats, and build an API call to run regularly to access that data when and how I want. But I don't want to focus on that this morning. APIs, I got to involve my IT. Maybe long-term, I'll work with them on this. But my second option now is to go to this manage output files section. Now I need to give an important caveat here before I do this. Only admins can modify this section of MCAS, and all modifications should be made with caution. Because if your company is already running some sort of automation on the files that you receive from MCAS, changes to this section could break that. So make sure that you've talked to the people that need to be aware of any changes you're making to data coming out of the product. But if you're an admin like me who knows they need to make the changes, we'll point ahead. So from this section, I can toggle on and off files uploaded to the SFTP site. You'll see daily and hourly load data options depending on what you license. And then, of course, you'll also see daily weather station and hourly weather station data options. So I'm going to go ahead and enable this hourly weather station data and click on the details to see a little more of the options that are available to me. So I'm going to go through, set up the columns I want. Once again, I'm going to include those same columns that I set earlier. So I'm going to set dew point, I'm going to set timestamp, and I want these HDDD data points. Before I have this all locked in, I can go ahead and download a sample of it in my browser, just get a quick look, make sure the file looks how I expect it to, and assuming it does, then I can go ahead and save the configuration off. Yeah, so here's the file that I just pulled out, and it looks like I want it to. It's got all the data I want it to along the top. Cool. So I'm going to save this, and I've got this warning here reminding me of the kind of warning I gave at the start of this area, that this could affect some things. Like I said, I'm an admin that knows what I'm doing. I'm going to hit submit. So as soon as my next forecast runs, this file is going to be uploaded to the output folder of the SFTP site. Now there's one last use case I'd like to show you, and it's a little bit more of a backwards looking one. So in this case, I have some prior day, let's say February 24th, that I know MCAST did pretty bad on, and I need to report out about it to some management. So I'm going to open up this performance tab. Now, I can't remember for sure, but I feel like I recall the weather forecast maybe not having been too correct that day. I do want to go back and do some digging to verify that recollection and just gather more data overall. So once I open the performance page, I know the date I was looking for was in late February, February 24th. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the heating season, because I know obviously that's going to include the data point I want. I also know that we made nominations on the first forecast that morning, so I want to make sure it's set to earliest. And I'm going to go ahead, the rest of the settings look how I expect. So I know it was on Metropolis, and I'm going to click into that area to get a little more data. Now, when I click on the Metropolis stats, what I want to do is open up this weather forecast error chart. But before I even go further there, I'm also going to click on this button over to the right. It kind of looks like two boxes stacked on each other. This is what I'm going to call the vertical comparison. This will allow me to stack that weather forecast error on top of other errors. So I'm going to do the load forecast error so that it's really easy to see them alongside each other. I get the same data points lighting up in each graph. Really helpful for my analysis. So I'm also going to go ahead, I said February 24th. I'm going to kind of zoom in on that point on both of these charts. So let's see, February 24th, I can see that there was 3 to 4% error on the weather forecast, came in a little warmer than initially expected. And then I can also see that perfect weather forecast. When I look down at the bottom, the green line is the forecast that MCAST reran when we used observed data for the weather. So I can see that drop my error from 20% all the way down to 8%. A pretty notable improvement. So like the difficulty in forecasting that day, the weather error was definitely a factor. But that 8% error is still kind of suspect to me, because I can tell when I look up at the top, most of the winter Metropolis was getting between 2 and 5% error. So I'm still going to send an email out to MEA's data science team for a little more info before I consider the report up to my management complete. They might want to do some tweaking to my modeling. But regardless, I have a lot more information now than when I started. So that about wraps up my weather data scenarios in MCAST for today's presentation. I hope I didn't take up too much time, and I hope that was helpful to some users on the call. And now I'm excited to hand the screen off to Steve Root for the main event, a review of this past winter.
Every time I participate in an MEA webinar, I am so impressed by the applications and the use of creativity and the design of MCAST. I am blown away. Not only do you show complex data sets quickly and easily, but man, oh man, you give me an experience that I love when I interact with data. And so, you know, hats off to you and Tom and Ron and the whole team, because it's just absolutely incredible. So thank you for allowing me to do that. One of the things that I hate to see when I follow you and Alex is that what I really need is to attend some of these forecaster conferences, because you guys provide golf lessons, and that's one of the things that I need. I'm really excited to be here. As I have mentioned with every webinar, I'm excited also to notice that we are co-located in terms of our ideas of data, and especially heating degree days. And so I felt like it was important to talk about the actual numbers of what happened in 24-25 in terms of heating degree days. Before the season starts, we always look at, what are the effects of weather? What can we expect? Is it going to be a El Nino, La Nina? How are the storm tracks unfolding, and what does that mean? But towards the end of the season, going into the next season, we always like to look at the review and heating degree days, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. If you've been with me in the past presentations, you'll know that there are aspects of our database at AccuWeather that make us unique. In that regard, the database that I manage, that I've designed, uses industrial grade weather stations all over the world. These are terribly expensive, government maintained, government operated, government calibrated, industrial grade sensors and systems. And we have taken these data sets from these weather stations that are, by the way, NTIS traceable. They're terribly accurate. They're mandated by law to be corrected as soon as there's a malfunction. And we've used this database to regress back in time from 1950, January 1 to now. And it's that database of historical data that provides us trend statistics on how things are changing in terms of climate. They give us the ability to create return frequencies on how often do we see extreme wind events, hail events, temperature events, and so forth. And it's the same weather stations that this AccuWeather for Business point source data is predicted. And so the predictions that we offer for these same weather stations go out 2 years. And just recently, just in the last 18 months, we've combined this database with AR5 climate data sets that take daily data all the way out to 2100. So let's go back. Let's start and look at the 24-25 season across the United States. It was a blend of La Nina. We knew that it was coming. We knew that it was going to unfold, and it did so right on schedule. The unique thing about last winter was that it also combined La Nina effects with unexpected, radically changing extreme weather events. And I'll talk about some of those in just a season. But for the most part, this La Nina continued through the entire winter season. It's now starting to decay, and we're going into a neutral situation, which will continue us through much of the summer going into fall, and then we expect another change. These extreme events that occurred not only resulted in radically changing temperature patterns, but it also gave areas of the country extreme weather events. For example, in north central New York, there was a significant event lasting a few days that provided nearly 66 inches of snow in parts of north central New York. That cold and snow in mid and late January went all the way down to the Gulf Coast. I was in New Orleans at a scientific conference there in mid-month, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to get out of here because this event is coming. And son of a gun, New Orleans ended up with about 8 inches of snow, but it was more than that. It was about 52 fatalities. There was over $500 million worth of damage that occurred during that period. And it was due to these radically changing events that we saw in late January going into February. So when I gathered the data to compile this presentation, I use what I call climate zone hub cities or hub weather stations. And many years ago, as I began to design our database, I defined those weather stations that would act as a proxy for about 53 different climate zones across the country. That allowed us to radically and quickly change design concepts and our modeling. It allowed us to do bias correction in terms of how we look at forecasts. But these are the weather stations that I use to compile the data sets that I'm showing you today. So let's take a look at September. September for the contiguous US averaged about 68.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost 4 degrees above average. And it ranked as the second warmest September in the last 130 years. Generally, temperatures across much of the contiguous US were near average or above average, but there were some locations, such as central Texas, the mid-Mississippi Valley, the southeast, and the mid-Atlantic coast that were near average. That being said, for the month of September, Arizona, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota ranked the warmest on record. And as I display monthly graphics going forward today, the graphic on the right is what happened this last winter compared to the winter before. So you can see that September in the winter before actually was warm out west as well. The maximum temperature, daytime temperatures across the US was 81.8. That was about 4 degrees above average. It ranked the second warmest daytime temperature. The nighttime temperature was the fourth warmest for September. And when you compile for those 53 climate zones, the heating degree days, you can see that generally in September, there's not a lot of heating degree days, but September this past winter season was 44% of the 30-year normal HDDs. Okay, moving into October. Here again, another warm month. The month as a whole across the country was 59 degrees. That was almost 5 degrees above normal, and it ranked the second warmest October in the last 130 years. Record warmth. Portions of the West, the Deep South, saw above average temperatures, but October was also Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas was the warmest on record. And that resulted in extremely mild conditions. There were many other states that ranked in the top 10 as well. The daytime temperature for October was 73.2. That's nearly 7 degrees above the 20th century average. And it was the second warmest daytime temperature of October of the last 130 years. Many other locations saw pockets of record-breaking warmth. Arizona, Wyoming, Texas was the warmest October. The nighttime lows were the sixth warmest on record. So if we compile September and October cumed going through the winter season, here is the presentation for HDDs. Still again, below the 30-year and the warmest of the last 10 years through October, resulting in about 66% of the 30-year normal. November, we saw a little bit of coolness in the Southwest, which was a drastic change from the year before. Most of the western states were colder than the previous winter, but November was 45.3 degrees F. That was almost 4 degrees above average, and it ranked the sixth warmest on record. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Maine saw their warmest on record, and 26 states saw November that was actually in the top 10. Daytime highs, 3 degrees above normal. Nighttime lows, approximately 4.2 above normal, and that resulted in total HDDs cumed through November of only about 80%. Now we came close in 2015, 2016 was just slightly milder by 6 HDDs. So in essence, last winter through November was nearly the warmest of the last 10. December sure didn't feel like December. In fact, most of the country, the western 2/3 of the country, were warmer than average. December was about 38.3. almost 6 degrees above normal. Arizona had its warmest December on record. California, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma had the second warmest on record. Daytime highs were about 6 degrees above normal, and nighttime lows were about 5.5 degrees above normal. So it was the fourth warmest December for daytime highs and the fifth warmest for December on nighttime lows. Now, as you can well expect, that did very little to the cummed HDDs through December. We were about 85% of the 30-year normal and fewer than any other of the past 10 years through December. And then all of a sudden, something changed. Here comes January. January saw multiple lake effect snowfalls, a lot of winter storms tracked across the mid-Atlantic, all the way out to the northeast. The month kicked off prolonged snow and lake effects, seeing about 75 inches in parts of north central New York. January 1 and through 5th had a lot of snow. The next day, January 6th, we had another 12 inches of snow in parts of West Virginia and Maryland and Delaware. Dulles Airport in Virginia and Washington, D.C. had record-breaking snow. This was a quick hitter. This came in quickly and was out quickly. But many of those locations who don't necessarily see snow had totals ranging from about 6.5 to almost 8 inches. Then the Arctic air came in. So it was a combination, a 1-2 punch of cold air and snow. There was a wide swath of 6 to 12 inches that fell across Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, even the Florida Panhandle had snow. Another great example of that radical extreme weather was that cold outbreak that came in on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd that produced the coldest temperatures in a decade across several locations, dropping temperatures below zero. January 26 had a low of -9 in Pittsburgh, and was the site's coldest temperature, by the way, since February of 2015. Heavy rainfall, oh gosh, that occurred as well. On January 30th, there was a flash flooding event in parts of north central Texas, southeastern Oklahoma. This radical nature caused flooding not only in Oklahoma, but across Arkansas as well. 20% of the river gauges reported some sort of flooding during that event. In fact, one gauge, as I recall, in Dallas, indicated that flooding occurring on the 30th, the crest was 89 feet. That was 11 feet above flood stage. So it was dramatic. Terribly, terribly dramatic. January for the average for the month was 29.2. That was just 0.9 degrees below. So that gives you an idea that the first part of January continued the warmth from December, but the radical cold nature of that Arctic blast took those averages just down to about minus 1 degree. Ranking, by the way, the coolest third of the 130-year record. So dramatic changes in terms of the temperature pattern. January temperatures generally were below average across the central U.S., the southern Rockies, the mid-Atlantic, and the southeast. There were parts of Southern California, you may recall, that were destroyed by fires. 16,000 structures were lost in and around LA. There were 29 fatalities. So that combination of those events and the Santa Ana winds really made January stand out as radically changing. Here are the HDDs. We were now at 92% running from September through January of normal, and fewer than 8 of the last 10 years, the exception being, of course, 23, 24. And had it not been for the 898 in November of 2016. So by the end of January, there were only 2 years that were milder, 23, 24, which was terribly mild to finish that year, and of course, 2015, 2016. So the January cold began to retreat in February, but still, February 2025 was dramatically colder than February 2024. The average temperature for the month was 34.9. That was 1 degree above average, ranking it in the middle third of the 131-year record. Arizona had its second warmest February on record. New Mexico had its fourth warmest. The daytime temperatures ranked 46 degrees. That was about 1.2 above average. It was in the middle third. Nighttime temperatures were 23.7, 23.8. That was approximately 9 degrees above average. So here we are, gone through December, January, and February, and here are the HDDs. So through February, the country, based upon those 53 hub cities, were 94% of the 30-year normal, and fewer than all about 3 years of the past 10. So with the cold lingering from late January into February, parts of February, the winters of 23-24, 2016-17, and 2015 and 2016 were still milder in comparison for the 5 months ending through January going into February. And then all of a sudden, the heat came back as well into March. The winter was gone. March was warm again, 5.4 above average, ranking the 6th warmest of all Marches in the 131-year record. Kansas recorded its 4th warmest March on record. Nebraska and Texas saw its 5th warmest overall. There were 18 states experiencing an above average March, and the daytime temperatures in March averaged almost 7 degrees above average. It was the 4th warmest on record for daytime temps, and nighttime temperatures were up above average, of course, 4.1, ranking in the warmest 3rd on record. So now we come to HDDs, and now we see, with just a few parts of the season left, March 2025 was 93% of the 30-year normal, fewer, of course, than most of the last 10 years, but not as mild as the 23-24 season, which ended extremely warm, the 16-17 season, and the 15-16 season, compared through all the way through March. And then the last month of the study was April. Generally speaking, warm at normal or mostly warmer than normal across the entire CONUS area. It was the 3rd warmest April on record. Many states ranked in the top 10. Daytime temperatures for April ended up being 66.4. That was almost 3 degrees above average, and certainly ranking in the warmest 3rd on record. Nighttime temperatures for the CONUS area in April was 40.9. That was 2.3 degrees above average, and it also ranked in the warmest 3rd. So here's how we ended last year, this winter season, in terms of HDDs. 93% of the 30-year normal. We ended up with 4681 in total, averaged over the 53 hub cities. There were only 3 years that were more, milder, thanks to the February, March of those periods that we've been talking about. And so as a result, the year ranked this way. You can get to see how we ended up. 24-25 was closer to the warmest than the coldest of the last 10 years. Normal, of course, significantly higher than what we saw. And so as a result, you can say that except for that extreme January, early February pattern, the entire season was terribly, terribly mild. And if you compare 24-25 to 23-24, then you get to see the changes month by month and the percentage delta in HDDs accordingly by month. And so it was really only those core months of the winter that had a drastic change over the previous winter. And if you look at the slope of those changes, it always starts out fairly flat, and it's only in December, January, and February that we start to see the most recent ramp up. And you can see that 24-25 was true dead center of the past 10 years, but ended up because of the warmth to begin with, and of course the warmth that we ended out with, generally speaking, about midway in the last 10 years. Now, as far as we are concerned, we make predictions for all locations every day, every hour, and look at the HDDs. And here is the pattern of those forecasts that we started making for the winter season for the entire season period going all the way out. So if you look at the month by month, the colored background against those bars represents the forecast changes that we made every month about the first of each month. Of course, we're making forecast changes every day, but I just grabbed the first of each month to show you where we were. And then the bars in green represent the actual conditions, and you can see that as we traverse through the entire winter, the actuals end up meeting with our forecast. The total difference was about 244 HDDs. If you average that over the 53 hub cities, that's about 5 HDDs per season per station. And this reinforces the fact that even though we're using computer modeling, a handful of analog years, trend statistics to help us make that long-term forecast, when there is a trend established, in this case La Nina, all of those inputs to the long-range forecast come together and define with very little variation in our forecast traversing through the winter what we expect for that. Now, there have been winters that it hasn't occurred that way, but 24-25 was one of those winters that we knew what was going to happen, that La Nina has a definite signature, and you can use that signature to extract out the rest of the season. And that helps our clients. It helps Marquette Energy Analytics to look at the long range and understand where the opportunity is in the gas demand, gas heating season, and to understand how that consumer buying behavior is going to unfold. So with that in mind, that's how we ended up 24-25. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and that concludes my presentation.
All right, everyone, I appreciate your time. Thanks, Steve Root, for coming and joining us today. Hopefully everybody got some more information on this past year's winter and some of the weather features in MCAST. We'll be sure to do another one of these soon. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.